Dear colleagues, welcome to the seminar series related to the UNIgreen. The topic today is assessment and comparative analysis of the Common Agricultural Policy Strategic Plan in relation to the European Union policy and objectives. My name is Rositsa, Beluhova-Uzunova, and I'm Associate Professor at the Department of Economics at the Agricultural University of Plovdiv, Bulgaria. So, the assessment and comparative analysis of the Common Agricultural Policy strategic plans in relation to the broader European Union policies and objectives is of significant importance for both policymaking and practical implementation. The Common Agricultural Policy represents one of the most influential and financially substantial policies directly shaping the sustainability, competitiveness, and resilience of the European agriculture. By examining how national strategic plans align with the European Union priorities, such as the Green Deal, the Farm to Fork strategies, and Biodiversity Strategy, we can identify both synergies and also some issues in implementation. Understanding these dynamics is crucial for ensuring that agricultural policy is not only supports farmers and rural communities, but also contributes to climate neutrality, environmental protection, and food security. This comparative perspective across member states further allows for the evaluation of best practices, for some policy gaps detection, and of course for promotion of more harmonized approach to achieve the so-called wide goals of the European Union. Therefore, the topic holds really relevance. Let's take a look at the historical development of the Common Agricultural Policy. The first mention of the Common Agricultural Policy rules can be found in the Treaty of Rome, 1957. The objectives stated were to increase the agricultural productivity, to promote fair standard of living, and to ensure reasonable prices in supplies for consumers. The Common Agricultural Policy as such was launched in 1962, pursuing three main objectives: rise farm productivity and stabilize the agricultural markets, ensure availability of food at reasonable prices, and provide fair living standards for farmers. The Common Agricultural Policy was composed of the Common Market Organization on cereals, pork, poultry, wine, fruits, and vegetables, and the European Agricultural Guarantee Fund. Since 1962, the Common Agricultural Policy has undergone several reforms. In 1992, a reform introduced the direct payments for producers based on hectares of arable land or heads of livestock. At the same time, for cereals, oilseeds, crops, protein crops, including beef meat, which aimed at compensating the reduction of price support. With this reform, agri-environmental measures and early retirement scheme co-financed by community and member states build the foundation of what we should say was first pillar. Since then, the reforms follow similar logic, having less direct impact on production and markets, but rather introducing measures at correcting the distribution of support. The Agenda 2000 endorsed a more holistic approach and strengthened the accordance with the expected accession in the early 2000s. This reform introduced Pillar 1, of course, the direct payments, and Pillar 2, dedicated to rural development. In 2003, the reform provided more flexibility and options to member states. 2007 saw the introduction of the European Agricultural Guarantee Fund, replacing the other one, and the European Agricultural Fund for Rural Development, as well as the introduction of some other new innovations. The reform after 2013 for the Common Agricultural Policy 2014-2022 provided let's just say some new instruments as, for example, some measures related to climate change, animal welfare, and increased interpillar flexibility. So the new Common Agricultural Policy continues this pattern of change with new policy framework, with lessons learned from previous periods, and the new Common Agricultural Policy follows the goals of being more fair, greener, flexible in general. So we could see the new moments and the new innovations. So a fairer and more social common agricultural policy, better targeting of direct payments to achieve the results, of course, introduction of measures for active and small farmers, more greener gap, introduction of eco schemes to foster climate and environmentally sustainable practices, of course, a perform-based and simpler common agricultural policy, output-linked payments to member states, a single audit system, common performance framework for the former Pillar 1 and Pillar 2, established links between results and indicators, specific objectives to streamline monitoring and evaluation. And of course, more coherent common agricultural policy, one program document at national level, combining the Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 alongside with budget allocations for all member states. So what we can say in the innovative elements in detail, of course, we include some it will include some innovative elements. First of all, the key element is the merging of Pillar 1 and Pillar 2. Of course, the required setup of eco schemes under the direct payments, generally accounting for 25% of direct payments funding. Conditionally in the new Common Agricultural Policy contains additional more strong environmental requirements and several elements of reform that affect the administrative implementation of the Common Agricultural Policy. So we could see that intervention in the new Common Agricultural Policy are organized along three main categories: direct payments, sectoral intervention, and rural development intervention. The new Common Agricultural Policy is structured around three general objectives and 10 specific objectives, 9 being organized around these three general objectives for more competitive, greener, and fair Europe, and one being a cross-cutting objective, fostering knowledge and innovation. The member states' contribution to these 10 objectives are described in their strategic plans, providing a framework for member states' interventions. So, under this strategic plan for 2023-2027, strategic plan of the member states account for about 260 billion euro, or 7 member states have various options to adapt the allocation of their implementation preferences, including transfers between direct payments and rural development funding, co-financing rates, degressivity capping. So the total budget of the 28 strategic plans is around 204 billion in terms of total public expenditure, including 43 billion of national co-financing under the rural development and sectoral support and after transfers. So with national co-financing, rural development funding represents 36% of the total expenditure. Meanwhile, the direct payments are not subject of national co-financing, in contrary to the sectoral intervention. For sectoral payments, the planned national contribution is around 324 million, bringing the European Union contribution rate to 96.5 planned total public support. In comparison, the distribution of the Common Agricultural Policy expenditure in terms of funding was similar in the previous programming period, with dominance of Pillar 1 accounting for 77% of the total expenditure and rural development for 23%. So we could see here we could see here the distribution of the strategic plan budget by member states. We could see that France, Italy, Spain, Germany, and Poland are the member states with the largest budget, while less than $1 billion is allocated in Luxembourg, Cyprus, and Malta. The relative distribution of the CAP funding, notably, we could see that the share of direct payments in total public expenditure is above 70% in Denmark, Spain, Latvia, and Belgium, Waldonia, while less than 40% in Austria, Finland, Slovenia, Luxembourg, and Malta. In comparison, the European Union average is 64%. These differences are the results of initial allocation of budget, but also member states' options in terms of transfer between direct payments and rural development intervention and co-financing. The direct payments include decoupled direct payments covering mandatory basic income support for sustainability and payments for small farms to support farmers' income, the complementary redistributive income support for sustainability to support smaller and medium-sized farms, the complementary income support for young farmers to support producers, and the new eco schemes. The coupled payments also form part of direct payments. The planned distribution of direct payments you could see on the figure. Well, we could see that the basic income support for sustainability and payments for small farms are the largest share, 51.5%, compared to direct payments in 2019 has slightly decreased. Redistributive support has gained importance compared to 2019, and it is slightly decreased. The redistributive support has gained importance compared to 2019, as I said. The income support for young farmers also slightly increased importance. Eco schemes are the main innovation and account for 23.8% of direct payments. And finally, the share of coupled payments has increased slightly from 10.8 in 2019 to 12.3 for 2023-2027. Member states define minimum requirements in their strategic plans to determine which farmers are eligible for direct payments. These include minimum area under which no direct payments shall be granted to active farmers, and the member states may also apply financial thresholds. So these are the main directions. The observations from 2015-2020 funding period highlighted an uneven distribution of direct payments, with only 15% direct payments going to basically to more than 75 of the European farms in the financial year 2020. Some of the instruments which can be used to respond to this distribution are therefore for the fair cap, are capping and degressivity, which can both used on voluntarily basis. So in 2023-2027 programming period, member states may decide, according to the regulation, to cap the total aid given to one farm. An upper limit is 200,000 euro per year that may be fixed on the amount of direct payments received. Member states may also apply degressivity and reduce the amount of basic income support received by a single farm up to 85% or more if support exceeded 60,000 per year. The budget recovered by member states is available for other measures. We could see that only 11 of the 28 strategic plan use capping and degressivity. 2 strategic plans apply degressivity only, 4 member states, including Bulgaria, and 5 only capping, and 5 both of them. Of this group of 11 member states, 7 make use the possibility of the subtract salary cost, including unpaid family work of the basic aid amount before applying capping or degressivity. The recovered amounts are mostly used by member states for complementary redistributive income support for sustainability, but also for other interventions. Eco schemes are the main novelty in the new programming period compared to the previous. They provide support for active farmers who apply agricultural practices beneficial for the climate, the environment, and the animal welfare. They support new or existing practices, in latter case, usually on larger area compared to 2014-2020. In the green architecture of the Common Agricultural Policy, eco schemes have to go beyond conditionality. They can be programmed next to the others or on the top of the eco schemes and setting more demanding requirements. Unlike greening, which was compulsory, eco schemes are voluntary for farmers but mandatory for member states. They should represent at least 25% of the direct payments. You could see on the figure that 18 member states allocate lower than 25 level of eco schemes. 4 of these member states allocated around 50%, but have allocated more to their rural development program, environmental and climate. On the other hand, 6 member states allocated more than 25% to eco schemes. Bulgaria is in the middle. So eco schemes can be supported under two different approaches: payment additional to the basic income support or payment compensating active farmers or group of active farmers for all or the part of the additional cost incurred and income foregone as a result of commitments made and taking into account the targets for eco schemes. Those payments also cover transaction costs. Of course, each strategic plan must cover at least two of the following areas: climate, water management, soil management, biodiversity, animal welfare, or antimicrobial resistance. All member states cover soil management. Almost all, except Cyprus, Austria, and Sweden, cover biodiversity. Animal welfare and the resistance is tackled by 11 member states. So water management is covered by most of the, of course, most of these plans. Only 3 member states, Hungary, Italy, and Slovakia, do not cover water management. Environmental measures for the sustainable and reduced use of pesticides are covered via eco schemes in 21 member states. The number of eco schemes measured and propose varies. The complexity and level of ambition of the individual measures are quite different. The programming of eco schemes is complex because of their great thematic diversity and their strong relationship with conditionality. This freedom given to the member state has led to the situation where similar measures are programmed as eco-scheme measure in some countries or as agricultural and environmental practices in others. Organic farming, for example, can be supported both under rural development or under eco-schemes in first pillar, with the 12 member states actually support organic farmer to their eco schemes, and the other 7 also through these measures for agricultural and environmental practices under the rural development program. What about the sectorial interventions? Sectoral support interventions represent 4.5% of the total planned expenditure in the GAP. They make the form of the reimbursement of eligible cost, unit cost, lump sums, flat rate financing. The figure shows the distribution for sectoral interventions. Wine, fruits and vegetables represent the highest share of funding for this intervention. Apiculture, olives, hops and others representing smaller share. The weight of sectoral intervention strongly is different across member states and depends, of course, on the national conditions. For example, Belgium, Italy, the Netherlands, and Poland are the member states which represent the highest share of interventions. Meanwhile, Finland, Sweden, Denmark, Latvia, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Belgium, Estonia, Poland dedicate less than 1% for sectoral intervention. The member states, except Luxembourg, Malta, and Slovenia, use fruit and vegetable interventions. So the share of varies from less than 10%, for example, in Bulgaria, Czechia, and Croatia, to more than 15 other member states. 16 member states are eligible for wine interventions. The distribution of total public funding between different categories of rural development intervention at the level of each strategic plan reflects the diversity of member states' approaches to address their needs. Some have placed greater emphasis on environmental and climate intervention, others on investments, for example, Bulgaria, Belgium, Denmark, Finland, installation, risk management, Italy, for example, cooperation, the Netherlands. Environmental, climate-related and other management commitments is mandatory. The share of funds is the highest and has increased to 31% in the new programming period. However, there is a great difference with planning less than 20% in Malta, Poland, Greece and France under the Rural Development Program, while others spent more than 45%, for example, Hungary, Austria, on such interventions. However, this funding must be tempered by the fact that there is a high share under Rural Development Program is balanced by, share less than 25% of the X schemes. Compensation for natural and other area-specific constraints is relatively important and remains stable for around 18%. Area-specific disadvantages resulting from certain mandatory requirements, the share of this intervention is quite modest, but demonstrate a slight increase, 0.10%. Overall, these three categories account for around 80% of the total public funding. Investment in agriculture, forestry, and environmental and rural is the second largest component under the rural development. These investments are becoming less important, reducing their share from 35.8 to 29% in the current period. Setting up of young farmers and new farmers and rural business startup is declining in relative importance from 6.6 in previous period to only 4.8 in the current. Of course, risk management tools are optional. Around half of the member states, 14 of 27, have included risk management tools. Intervention under strategic plans are very unevenly. The share of risk management support has increased from 2% to 4.3%. Cooperation has leader and as main intervention. The share of cooperation is 10.4%, including around 7.2% leader. 12 member states have allocated more than 7% for leader, with Germany, Spain, and Estonia allocating above 10%. Knowledge exchange and dissemination of information account for 1.9% of the rural development interventions. Clustering supported where possible the development of typologies of this strategic plan, showing differences in some common moments of the implementation choices. Of course, several typologies can be defined or developed. First one, these typologies are based on the survey conducted by European Union. And the first one is based on structural criteria in 3 groups. So we could see that in the first group, there is countries characterized by high share of direct payments, reflecting strong reliance on income support. They also benefit from high contribution rate, and however, the average level of the support is below a European Union average, suggesting that although direct payments dominate in their common agricultural policy structure, the per hectare support remains modest. This pattern is typical for France, Poland, and Spain. The second group, where Bulgaria is, these strategic plans allocate also high share of direct payments, but unlike Group 1, their key feature low contribution rate, and their values are very divergent. Euro per hectare are very divergent, reflecting significant heterogeneity among member states. These divergences demonstrate differences in land structures, farm sizes, national preferences in shaping the measures. Group 3 shows a low share of direct payments, suggesting a stronger orientation towards rural development, environmental, and investment measures compared to the other groups. At the same time, they maintain a high European Union contribution rate, highlighting the importance of European co-financing. Similar to Group 2, their euro per hectare values are very divergent. This approach indicates a shift away from income support dominance to a more diverse agricultural policy framework. What we can see that Group 1 relies heavily on the EU finance direct payments, but delivers lower than average per hectare rate. Group 2 shows a mix of high direct payment share, but requires more national co-financing. Group 3 emphasizes on diversification away from direct payments, focusing more on the rural development program. Regarding economic aspects, criteria for clustering, the risk management tools are used, coupled income support, sectoral support, and investment support in rural development. You can see here the groups are 6. First one is only 3 countries. France, Italy show the highest share of farm using the CAP-supported risk management tools, reflecting strong engagement with insurance, mutual funds, and other instruments. They also record a very high share of farms receiving of course, other support, and this combination demonstrates a strong reliance on the common agricultural mechanism for both risk stabilization and sectorial competitiveness. The group B or the second group, the countries provide investment support below the average, and their coupled income support is around the average. The Group C, these countries demonstrate high share of farms with, of course, with coupled income support above average. They also provide higher than average investment support, except for Estonia. Sectorial support is generally very low, except Czechia. Group D are Austria and Belgium, Flanders, with high level of investment support. However, their share of farms is below average, and this reflects modernization-oriented approach. Cyprus and Portugal stand out with very high, this is Group E, sectorial support. This suggests the CAP implementation strongly toward to sector-specific sectors or commodities. The member states provide investment support lower than European average, and Group F, they have no or very little sectoral support and no or low coupled income support. In general, this is the second clustering, and the third clustering is based on the climate change adaptation and mitigation. Of course, they are targeted by conditional provision, series of eco-schemes, environmental practices, and investment and knowledge transfer. A majority of this strategic plan address climate change via eco-schemes. Several also address climate change, and 29% of the investment are tagged as green. Clustering is based on three result indicators: carbon storage in soil and biomass, reducing emissions from livestock, and investment related to climate, resulting then we could see four groups here. First group that are countries with high carbon storage in soil compared to the European average. They are not investing funds significantly in reducing livestock emissions, and they reflect a partial climate ambition. The second group is investing in reducing livestock. Their carbon storage is only slight above European Union average, and they are focused but balanced climate actions. The third group is the largest countries that shows a little climate ambition overall. There are exceptions, but general trend is limited action across the three key indicators. This suggests a reliance on traditional instruments with weaker integration of climate objectives, potentially showing progress towards the European Union targets. The fourth group here, Belgium and Ireland, stand out with a very high investment and proactive strategy where CAP funding is actively mobilized for climate mitigation, and their approach represents the highest level of climate ambitions. However, this typology reveals a fragmented picture of climate ambitions across the European Union, when only few countries show strong alignment with the climate objectives, while many remained at modest or low level of integration. So, the Common Agricultural Policy is a set of policy instruments with a relatively diverse implementation across member states. This heterogeneity is in part due to the greater flexibility of member states have had in the programming of their, of course, of their reactions in general. However, agricultural sector and the rural areas face, of course, diverse set of needs at the times even particularly are very, very different. And if we could make a summary, economic needs rank highly across most of the strategic plans. The majority of the member states selected for economic measures by nature, followed by the environmental and climate needs, social and rural needs. Furthermore, there is a high degree of thematic concentration among major needs. This is particularly the case for economic needs in the Croatia, for example, mostly economic, of course, also in all economic in Croatia and mostly economic in Finland, Latvia, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia, and Greece. The economic needs are prioritized, and the most common need is fair income support. Environmental needs, most often stated, is the need for climate and environmental protection. The social need seen most frequently is the need for generation renewal, followed by the rural revitalization. The needs specified in relation to farm viability, income support, and competitiveness were not always consistent with the results from the SWOT analysis or aren't clearly prioritized. The studies emphasize the selected needs in relation to the environment to lack of relevance and not consistently capture the environmental developments highlighted by the SWOT analysis. Across member states, the majority of needs are in absolute numbers are 200 51. Strategic Objective 8, followed by Strategic Objective 2. In response to the rising challenges linked to the climate change and the current environmental degradation, the European Commission published, of course, the European Green Deal. The transformation agenda of the European Green Deal is implemented through several strategic documents and policies, including Sustainable and Smart Mobility Strategy, the new Circular Economy Action Plan, the Fit for 55 package, Zero Pollution Action Plan, and Farm to Fork Strategy, and the European Union Biodiversity Strategy for 2030. With the respect of the strategic plan and, of course, the European Green Deal, all these strategies have very big relevance. They are great relevance, and they set us series of targets. You could see some of the targets. For example, 100% access to fast broadband internet, at least 10% of agricultural area in high diversity landscape futures, reduce the nutrient losses by at least 50% while ensuring deterioration in the soil fertility, and this will reduce the use of. All member states have provided explanation on the strategic plans, contribution to the Green Deal strategies. Yet certain issues prevail that can affect the contribution of these strategic plans to the European Green Deal. This concerns the inclusion of national values for all relevant fields. The ambition of targets describe the quality of the explanation provided and the sufficiency of financial allocation. First of all, the national values. The most issue is the biggest issue, let's just say, is the lack of information in the strategic plan on the quantified national values for all Green Deal targets that are included in the Farm to Fork strategy and biodiversity strategies. National values support non-binding commitment by member states and enable monitoring process. Certain aspects such as organic farming, broadband access are much more often addressed than others such as pesticides, nutrient loss, ambitions of the national values. The degree of ambitions in the meeting Green Deal objectives is very different across member states, yet a low level of ambition is seen in almost all strategic plans for at least one or more national targets, including in Bulgaria, Cyprus, Czechia, Denmark, Spain, France, Hungary, Croatia, almost all member states actually. Let's just not say it. So the quality of interventions, there is a great deal of variations across this strategic plan, while a lack of quality in explanation of measures is observed in some strategic plan. In others, measures are well elaborated. The Green Deal goals most often are requiring additional elaboration that are actually acquiring this elaboration are nutrient loss, pesticides, and the sale of antimicrobials. Financial allocation. Financial planning within the strategic plan is target-oriented, but rather focused on the identification of sources of funding that are already planned or in process of execution. Inadequate funding allocation to address Green Deal goals is identified in several strategic plans. For example, in the Netherlands, while the contribution to broadband internet are considered sufficient, they are lacking in the areas of preventing nutrient loss, for example, supporting high diversity landscapes and others. The agricultural sector is a key contributor to nutrient loss, yet most of the strategic plan did not contain national values in this field. Pesticide use is similarly high relevant to these objectives with respect to the agricultural sector. The strategic plan acknowledged the sufficiency in achieving a reduction of use and risk of chemical pesticide and more harmful pesticide,
Although national values are rarely set, the implementation strategies of the envisioned instruments frequently lack clarity, and substantial differences are identified in the scale and approach to the reduction of the use and the risk of pesticides. The use of antimicrobials and housing conditions of livestock are an issue within European agriculture that can conflict the aim of the Green Deal. A total of 4 member states provide national values for this indicator in their strategic plan, including Bulgaria, Czechia, Malta, Poland. In Belgium and the Netherlands, the European Commission has encouraged a more ambitious use of different interventions to further lower the use. Organic farming is one of the most widely addressed goals in the strategic plan. Financial planning and allocation, increasing ambition of targets, strengthening market development measures are among the relevant fields for improving organic farming goals. A total 24 strategic plans contain national values for organic farming. In Belgium, Italy, Malta, and Estonia, targets are ambitious and meet the goals, yet more details are required on the instruments and how they will meet the targets. On the other hand, the ambitions are low in Bulgaria, Croatia, Romania, Ireland, and Slovakia. Finally, in the Netherlands, Greece, Croatia, and Romania, no national targets are established. This strategic plan have mixed efforts in supporting an increase in the percentage of high diversity landscape features among the member states. Broadband infrastructure and fast internet are frequently addressed in the strategic plan, setting national values, providing detailed instruments for reaching this coverage, describing other policy funding and adequate financial allocation to meet the diverse needs and baselines are among most relevant fields. Few evaluation reports commended directly the contribution of the strategic plans to the European Green Deal. Primarily, contribution was evaluated indirectly through straighten the relevant strategic objectives, particularly 4, 5, 6, and conditionally rules and eco schemes included in the plans. Other reports view this contribution of the strategic plan as generally good. However, there are diverse opinions, and the time will show. The link between these results indicators and the European Green Deal goals is not completely robust. European Commission presented a report that is comparing these values. You could see on the table that half of the strategic plan did not include target value for the result indicator for sustainable water use, emission reduction in livestock. More than half of the plans show above average ambition regarding the organic farming, sustainable nutrient management. A further 13 strategic plans show ambition to sustainable and reduced use of pesticides. However, only 9 plans display significant ambition to the preservation of habitats and species. So we could see that in the first indicator, sustainable nutrient management, 18 strategic plan are above average, below average are 10. A majority show stronger than average ambition to improve this nutrient management. However, large agricultural producers like France, Italy, and Spain remain below average, suggesting uneven commitment among key contributors to these issues. So in the second indicator, 13 are above average, 15 plants are below average, and the balance is slightly towards below average performance, with only 13 member states committing above average. This indicates a wider gap in pesticide reduction ambitions, and notable agricultural economics like the Netherlands, Poland, and Spain lag behind. Development of organic agriculture, you could see that 18 plants are above average, 10 below average, and similar to the first indicators, most of the member states exceed the European Union targets. Countries traditionally strong in organics set ambition targets. In contrast, large agricultural players like the Netherlands, Poland, and Spain remain below average, limiting the progress towards Green Deal organic targets. About the preserving habitats and species, 9 are below average, 9 are above average, 19 are below average. This indicator shows the weakest overall ambitions. Most of the member states, including those with significant biodiversity challenges, as for example, Greece, Italy, set below average targets that shows insufficient integration of biodiversity object in the common agricultural policy implementation. Organic farming and nutrient management show progress in soil and sustainable farming practices. There is biodiversity issues, and the analysis shows that while nutrient management and organic farming receive relatively ambitious commitments, the reduction of pesticides is mixed and biodiversity preservation remains the weakest link. This imbalance suggests that although the Common Agricultural Policy strategic plans contribute to the parts of the Green Deal, they fall short in ensuring holistic progress across all environmental and climate targets. The analysis of the strategic plans showed that contributing to an economically sustainable common agricultural policy is the priority objective widely shared by all member states. In most cases, the national strategic plans were designed in continuation of the intervention implemented in the previous period while applying the provision and intervention towards a fairer common agricultural policy. The interventions to move to a fairer common agricultural policy is explicit. Some member states limit their mandatory aspects, while others have gone beyond this threshold. So, in theory, specific provision and interventions are available, and they promote economic sustainability. So almost all the elements of Pillar 1 and an evolution towards a fairer common agricultural policy in terms of contribution to income support. The latter remains within the framework on the area-based income support. What is happening in practice? The objective of supporting farmers' income with direct, mainly area-based support is still at the heart of the common agricultural policy. Direct payments remain predominant, accounting for more than 70% of the support, while the basic income support for sustainability represent on average 50% of the direct payments, compared to 54 in 2019. However, it now includes more restrictive and environmental and climate-related aspects. When comparing the two programming periods, in most cases, the amount of direct payments changed slightly by a few percentage points. External convergence has a restrictive effect between member states and is very explicit for the Baltic states. Risk management is addressed in very heterogeneous way by these plans. However, not at all to a major convergence of farms, which common agricultural policy supported risk management tools. Several member states address risk management outside the common agricultural policy. Farm modernization is predominant under the rural development for some member states. For example, Austria, Belgium, Germany, France, Italy, which share more than 10 to 35% of farm receiving investment support. Better supply chain organizations is approached in very heterogeneous way. In Austria, almost 70% of the farm participate in one of those groups, 36 in Italy, followed by Belgium. Member states' implementation of distributive tools is very interesting. So 12 member states use one or more of these distributive tools, and some of them do not apply either capping or degressivity. The effect of the fair cap is measured by several impact indicators, since their assessment might be too late. Actual income distributive effect should be assessed earlier by additional results indicator linked to the evolution of the income support distribution bar by farm type and farm size. Greener GAP, the greener common agricultural policy, of course, the strategic plans are designed to contribute to a greener common agricultural policy. The regulation offers a framework that explicitly guides national strategic plan to become greener, such as through conditionality rules and introduction of eco schemes. This being said, these strategic plans their level of ambition is quite different. The capacity to reach environmental and climate objectives will depend on the actual implementation of these schemes and agroecological measures, their uptake by farmers, the environmental and climate effectiveness, and the application of conditionality. What is in the theory? The share of budget supporting climate and environmentally friendly farming practices are actually have increased, of course. Conditionally applying to the common agricultural policy beneficiary has been partly straightened, while voluntary eco schemes represent at least 25% of the budget of direct payments. Under rural development, at least 35% of the budget is targeted on climate and environment, while 30% was required in the previous period. In practice, climate-related practices are considered under conditionally for three specific measures. Most member states' eco schemes address climate issues, and this is partly new. In addition, as in the previous period, climate-friendly practices are supporting environmental agriculture and environmental measures, green investment, as well as cooperation and knowledge exchange. The capacity of the strategic plans to reach the climate-related objectives like reduction of the emissions of greenhouse gases from agriculture will depend on farmers' uptake of the respective eco schemes and their climate-related effectiveness. On more ad hoc basis, the limitation actually granted by member states from the plant standards is in sensitive areas is also important. According to the clustering indicators, 11 member states have higher climate ambition than the 16 remaining, based on what we saw in the table related to the greener gap. Environmental related practices are considered under conditionality. Eco schemes and area-specific constraints and green investment, as well cooperation, knowledge exchange are also there. Environmental standards have been tightened regarding water, biodiversity, and so to lesser extent. Let's just say that the socially sustainable and simpler common agricultural policy, the strategic plan will contribute to a socially more sustainable common agricultural policy with emphasis on generation renewal, working condition in farming sector, and animal welfare, supporting two areas of national constraint as well as other type of coupled income support for sectors that encounter difficulties like cattle, sheep, goat. Further support to rural areas beyond farming sector is mainly provided by leader and rural investment. Cooperation might also support operational group related to rural topics. What is in theory? In theory, the gap. So basically, strategic objectives 7, 8, and 9 has been thematically broadened by the inclusion of new social conditionality for agricultural workers, gender equality measures, animal welfare. More explicit emphasis is also devoted to generation renewal here. Also, couple income support for agricultural sector in difficulty support to farming in related to constraints as well as risk management also contribute to socially sustainable common agricultural policy. What is happening in practice? The specific application of these novelties will unfold during the implementation. For example, measures for childcare concerning gender, additional support for new and young farmers. Regarding support for young farmers, there is already shift from rural development to more general direct payments with the income support for young farmers. The expenditure under the Rural Development Policy Priority in 2014-20 is similar to the budget allocated to leader and rural investment in the new programming period. It is around 12%. Sorry. There is a shift towards leader. The value and importance of leaders' local rural development approach has been recognized, and the needs in rural areas will mainly be addressed through leader. Beyond leader, cooperation might also support rural operational group as well as rural investments. More simpler and flexible common agricultural policy. The implementation of common agricultural policy is complex. The need to decrease the administrative burden and to ensure ownership and uptake of the policy by beneficiaries has been already highlighted. The European Commission has proposed several changes for simpler and more flexible policies, such as new delivery model and single strategic plan, including the possibility to transfer funds. In short-term, changes are likely to increase costs to adapt administration and management system to new architecture of the common agricultural policy. As for the beneficiaries, even if a concentrated measure may limit this burden, the strengthening of conditionality on one hand and the involvement in the eco-schemes on the other remain complex and present a challenge. In the new program period, all funds are under a single plan against common specific objectives and common set of results indicators. So instead of those 118 rural development programs that were existing in the previous periods, the combination of interventions under a single plan aims to promote a more coherent approach and avoid offsetting effects. The new delivery model includes SWOT analysis assessment of needs, which allows for a clearer intervention logic of the policy and facilitating the monitoring process and public money expenditure. In the past programming periods, the need to decrease the administrative burden and to ensure ownership and uptake of the policy is, as I said, highlighted. In general, this is related to the simpler gap, subsidiarity and state aid. Increased subsidiarity allowed member states to better respond to their needs, giving them the opportunity to progress towards the objectives of a fairer, greener, and more social common agricultural policy. In order to ensure a minimum coherence, the framework is based on the conditionality in several mandatory provisions. Increased subsidiarity concerns especially budget transfer and the wide array of instruments out of which member states can make their choice according to their needs in relation to the objectives, of course, but when giving more flexibility to the member states in their implementation, the gap should ensure its alignment to the specific objectives of the Common Agricultural Policy and the Green Deal objectives. For example, 25%, as I already said, is allocated for eco schemes, and 35% for rural development funds has been marked on environmental and climate. Looking into the instruments, actually the Common Agricultural policy does not provide the full picture as member states address rural development and agricultural needs with the instruments outside the Common Agricultural Policy. In certain member states, this is observed in risk management, forestry, renewable energy, as well as broadband and other non-farming rural development investments. For example, Italy addresses irrigation with other funds. Although the new delivery model implies more flexibility and less prescriptive approach to financial management, the policy is still framed around a common set of rules, objectives, indicator, annual financial reporting. This is notably reflected in the horizontal regulation, which includes penalties for recurring violation, enhanced reporting obligations, and European Union audits. Hence, the increased subsidiarity is applied in the strategic plans do not put at risk the common future of the Common Agricultural Policy. Regarding the let's just say the evaluation framework, flexibility should allow member states to conduct evaluation according to their need. However, few requirements for national evaluation are likely to generate different approaches and reduce the comparability and dialogue across member states. The new Common Agricultural Policy Framework introduced a number of changes aimed at increasing overall policy coherence between the use of the budget from the two European Union funds and programming, and actually merging the Pillar 1 and Pillar 2. Of course, there is eco schemes and case conditionality as a central green elements, and of course, the approval involved structural dialogue, and there is a high acceptance of the Commission recommendations. So what we can see, the analysis of all these, let's just say, strategic plans shows great diversity of the approaches adopted by member states. However, direct payments remain very dominant. The main changes compared to the previous periods are the significant increase in the redistributive income support, the increase in the share of coupled income support, and the introduction of new voluntary climate and environmental schemes with a wide variety of scopes and approaches. The distribution of direct payments also shows the diversity. Support to the agricultural sector remain dominant, of course, with a clear contribution to food security and agricultural resilience. However, this emphasizes at the times to determine of meeting non-agricultural and rural development needs. Furthermore, the contribution of national funds is very variable between 12 and 80% funding. Environmental and climate measures, risk management instrument, and leader have been strengthened. At the level of young farmers, there is an overall shift from the rural development to direct payments, and there is now an obligation to implement intervention for young farmers in all member states. Support for non-agricultural rural development is increasingly provided by True Leader. The main needs identified in the whole strategic plan emphasize economic and environmental issues. The interventions in the strategic plans are largely framed to address these needs with lower ambition for environmental and climate instruments in some member states in relation to the identified needs. There is a clear focus on addressing economic needs, sometimes under targeting rural development funding and environment. Environmental needs are broadly addressed in the strategic plan, but the level of ambition is not high. Furthermore, due to the funding focus of the basic income support for sustainability, at times relatively generous design of the redistributive payments with a broad eligibility criteria open a various farm sizes, the impact of the common agricultural policy in improving the position of smaller farms is to be seen, actually. Contribution to the European Green Deal objectives are mentioned in the strategic plan, but are largely unspecified. The eco schemes, together with the agricultural and environmental practices and conditionality requirements, are likely to generate most of the associated impacts on these objectives. However, the eco schemes are not ambitious in many member states, unfortunately. So what we could say about recommendations. First of all, the first recommendation is to raise the ambition of eco schemes and avoid shifting funds to lower ambitious schemes, even though member states are required to spend 25% of their payments budget actually for eco schemes. As a general rule, they have significant flexibility in terms of the funding allocation between individuals. Eco schemes measure with some extent expected to have higher uptake due to lower requirements. The second recommendation, the European Union Common Agricultural Policy Network to be used for best practice sharing and capacity building. The implementation of new interventions such as the eco schemes can be tied to a complexity as administrative system adapt to the new implementation modes. To support the uptake of this new intervention and to foster change and common learning across the European Union member states, they should make an active use of this network, and particularly to exchange best practices and implementation experiences. Third recommendation, assessment of eco schemes, green architecture, post by very in early stage, let's just say in early stage, because in general, the programming period is relatively brief, with the efforts compensating soon for the post-2027 period due to green architecture as a part of this new programming period framework. An assessment of this architecture is necessary to safeguard robust policy design for this post period. As such, it is recommended that the European Commission launches this assessment of the implementation of eco schemes. Fourth recommendation, to start early the evaluation to inform for the next reform. So within the new common agricultural policy, the new evaluation framework gives the member states more flexibility over when and how they could evaluate these strategic plans. It is recommended that member states start with an evaluation already during the first years and not in the last year, actually. Fifth recommendation, the results indicators are not consistently able to capture the results of interventions specified in the strategic plan, particularly in relation to the green architecture and in relation to the redistributive support. As such, it is recommended the evaluation efforts of the European Union and member states level future significant ambitions in the assessment of outcomes tied to the intervention. Furthermore, the European Commission should provide a guidance to the member states to assess their interlinkages between results and impacts, including connections to the interventions. The sixth recommendation, several member states opt to target important needs specified in the strategic plans with other policy and tools outside the common agricultural policy. In order to ensure overall policy coherence and contribution to the European Green Deal, it is recommended that evaluation efforts do not only cover the instruments of these strategic plans, but also national and European Union policy instruments contributing to this goal. The seventh recommendation is related to the assessment of administrative burden. So, and take, of course, the corrective action to simplify the system. This reform devolved significant administrative competencies to the member states, such as increased flexibility in the eligibility criteria, single audit in comparison with the previous period. Further, the introduction of monitoring and control technology should streamline administrative system in order to assess whether this has resulted in actual changes in this burden perceived by beneficiaries and authorities. A systematic assessment of this burden is recommended at 2 years after the implementation of the strategic. Once further, it is recommended that the outcome of this assessment are translated into actions to limit the burden for, of course, authorities and beneficiaries. The last recommendation is to strengthen the monitoring of environmental and climate commitments with the European Union level support. The systematic monitoring and reporting of environmental and climate commitments beyond the existing indicator is an essential component to enable follow-up on the contribution of the strategic plans. As environmental and climate monitoring can be complex, it is recommended European Commission to provide active support to member states in terms of guidance and good practices, as well as related technical knowledge. Actually, the topic is very interesting. The approaches are very diverse, and we're gonna see in the next years what will happen, because this will guide us, or this will be lesson learned for the new programming period. So thank you for all your attention. It was pleasure for me. I hope the topic could lead to wider discussion, broader discussion, because the new moments, the new innovative measures are especially related to the eco schemes are pretty interesting. So thank you once more for your attention.